Welcome to Torah Smash, the podcast for nerdy Jews, where our lives of Jewish learning collide with our love of nerd culture. In each episode, we discuss what we lovingly call a Torah Smash, which we have defined as a beautiful collision of one thing from the world of Judaism with another from nerd culture. I'm Ethan Lane Miller, and joining me today are
Barack Malkin.
RDY.
Hi, friends.
Hi.
Hey.
I am looking forward to discussing this topic with you.
Ooh.
Me too.
So I'll just jump right in. So as you both know, and I think many of our listeners know, I did not do Jewish youth group as a kid, but nor did I really do camp as a kid. But as the joke goes, I got there as quickly as I could. Yeah. And so my first foray into being a Jewish professional was being the volunteer youth group advisor at Adat Chaverim in Plano, Texas, my synagogue. And it ended up being a absolutely life-changing experience for me. And I then moved to New Jersey, of all places, to be a full-time synagogue youth director. Again, working, very closely with Nifty, proud to have produced several regional board members from that synagogue. It was wonderful, fun. And then when I got the opportunity to return back to Texas, to be back in my home region, working for Green Family Camp, it was incredible because Green Family Camp was pioneering this new model of integrating Nifty regions into camp. And it was this wonderful special opportunity. And I got to be what I called Nifty adjacent until the timing was right. And I got to be the regional director for a year. I've had many wonderful jobs and worked with many wonderful people since then, but it was truly the most special year of my life professionally.
What year was that?
Well, it was 2019 to 2020.
Yeah.
Ooh.
So I'm subscribed to the monthly Nifty Tour newsletter because I'm in this category of a former staff member, both for Nifty and for Green Family Camp and the URJ. And it's been a fun way to just see what's going on with the region. And a couple weeks ago, we got the June update sent out, and it included some big news that, in so many words, Nifty Texas Oklahoma region as an entity is not going to exist anymore. There are, of course, continued teen engagement opportunities, and Nifty will live on in some form or fashion, but the Nifty Texas Oklahoma region that I came to love as an adult, as a staff member, as a profession, that's not going to exist anymore. And so that brings up a lot of feelings. And so my smash for today is, what do we do when something so important to us, Jewishly or nerd culturally, is ending?
We sanctify it.
I think the heartbeat, there's been a lot of instances over even just my short life where something that I have loved in the Jewish space has not existed anymore, right? The synagogue I grew up at is no longer at the building it was. It's in a JCC adjacent building, right? Kutz Camp is no longer what it was. Nifty as a whole is no longer the same way it was. There's a lot of elements where change happens in a way that we don't want it to. But this is going to be rough. I don't know where I sit on this in the spectrum with everybody. I am more happy that I got to experience those situations than I am sad that it doesn't exist. I am sad it doesn't exist. Like, I wish, you want your kids to do the same things that you did because they shaped you into who you are. But our kids will have different experiences that will shape them into who they are. So
Not if they're not replacing them with something that's
no.
worthwhile.
I that's what I mean. I'm like, our kids aren't going to just be blobs of a flesh of a human when they turn in their 20. Like, they will have experiences and programs that we implement them in, Jewish or not Jewish, that will shape the people that they become, right? And they will have the same nostalgic feelings that for those programs or those activities that I did scouting as a kid, and I
Mhm.
don't think we're signing our kid up for scouts because the local troop by us I haven't heard great things about. That's something that I wished my kids. I always envisioned being a like one of the scout masters, and my kids going through that, and that's not going to happen. But they'll have other experiences, at Camp Harlem, for example, that will replace some of those scouting pieces. But I do believe that, everybody will find something that speaks to them, just like how our, grandparents, when they came over, really wanted stuff from the old country to be what our parents or great grandparents or grandparents, whatever that shift was for your family, they really wanted them to experience what they did as a kid, and which is why a lot of traditions sort of have shifted into families. And so I'm more happy that I got to experience it than I am sad that my kids won't or other kids won't, just because I the other pieces pop up. There's other things that happen. So I'm sure I'm on a different spectrum than you all. I just have I don't know why. I just have like a more positive reflection on it than a traumatic impact. And I'm not sure why.
I mean, these can be separated. Like I am so grateful for my time, and especially for the year that I was the regional director. But you were there, Barack. That ending
Yeah.
was
Yeah,
brutal.
I was right same year. I was the regional director for Nifty Gurn Urban Mitzvah Corps, a job that I'd wanted for over 10 years. I was aiming for that position, and then COVID happened, and that position no longer existed. And so it was a bit of a gut check. If I always thought that that would be me for a long time, I'd be one of those long-term regional directors, and it did not happen. But I'm so happy that I got the chance to do it.
I think having a good attitude about it is different from like what do we do when we lose the things? Like have a good attitude and I mean that's what sanctifying it is it's like we say Kaddish, not Kaddish doesn't mention someone's death. It doesn't mention death at
Right.
all. It's just praises God. So it's like the poster on my sister's bedroom wall that said, "Don't be sad that it's over, be happy that it happened."
Yeah.
Um,
As
and,
long as
and
it's taken in a non like toxic positivity way. I think we can be both. We can be glad that it happened and sad that it's over.
yeah, and you wouldn't be sad that it's over if it wasn't meaningful to you. I have more questions about Nifty in general. I did not grow up with Nifty. I grew up with BBYO. And part of the reason I chose BBYO is that the camp that I went to, those kids did BBYO, and the kids who did Nifty, like I would be invited to Nifty things, but the kids who did Nifty were the people who picked on me, and I wasn't interested in hanging out with them. So what I think is important about creating ritual to remember a thing is that it allows us to be sad that it is over. It allows us to cry, it gives us permission to shed tears. And at the same time, it celebrates.
Well, you talked about healthy and unhealthy. And for me, for a few years, I was unhealthy in how I handled or chose not to handle losing that job. It was it took me a while to realize I'm not handling this healthily. I need to
Mm.
really make a separation here.
Mm. But I mean, you lost it. You both lost these jobs because of COVID, right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it wasn't about you. It was about the world.
Yeah, which is there's so many things that we lost because of COVID.
And in
Um,
a way, it just makes it that much more unfair.
yeah,
Barack,
Totally.
I don't know if you remember this, but there was
probably not.
a
I have a
gap.
terrible memory.
All right, there was a gathering in February. It was like the regional board meetings.
Oh yeah, I was there.
Yeah, we were in Economawalk at
Yeah.
Rui, and we went around. There's an exercise where we all wrote. All the regional directors were sitting on. We wrote things, put them in a jar, and we took them out and read them. It was like our like fears and concerns.
Mm.
And the one that I wrote was I'm concerned that I will do everything right and it still won't be enough.
Mm.
And then
Wow.
a couple months later,
A
during
couple weeks later.
yeah, during the most miserable Zoom call of my entire life, someone referenced that and said, "I'm so sorry."
Yeah.
Wow.
And
Wow.
it was me. That was mine. I was living my nightmare.
Oh my gosh.
Wow.
Yeah, I
So it has taken me years to grapple with this, truly.
yeah. No, I feel that. The question like what do you do when you lose the thing that you really love and like this isn't the grief episode, but there's that
No.
element of that. There's absolutely that element of you have this thing and you lost this thing, and you've got to go through those stages. And so, if you, I'm glad you recognized that you were dealing with it, or you weren't dealing with it in the way that you wanted to, because you probably didn't follow the grief steps that you should have. You skipped something that you was unfulfilled in your heart, and so I
I was stuck at anger for a while.
yeah.
That's
And
okay.
absolutely. I I think the important part, and this is a hard one, I think, for a lot of people, is finding support. Is and not just getting together to talk and complain or be upset with each other. That's helpful. That's good. It's good to get the emotions out. But I think having somebody else just to talk about it is helpful, right? When we've had episodes of what happens when you have lost a loved one and the grief process. I think it's so important to get together and share about the good things that happened in that thing that you lost, because it's a nice reminder of the memories that you'll get to keep when this thing isn't there anymore. And I don't, man, I don't know why my brain deals with grief so differently that it feels one side for me, it feels really healthy that I can do that. And then the other side, I'm like, why am I not feeling the same years of anguish that other people feel? Like, here's a great example is that right, my mom died unexpectedly the week after we graduated. Me and my twin sister graduated college. Unexpected. And it took me a couple of years. There was a sermon I heard that really made a switch go off in my head like 2 years after my mom passed. And it really helped me grasp the concept of what I was dealing with. And my me and my sister, like when my mom's birthday would come around or her anniversary of her passing, we're feeling it really differently. And there's a part of me that's like, oh, I must be doing like okay if I'm processing it in such a way that I can deal with it really good. And the other side is me like, why am I not more upset? Like it feels like other people when they have these moments are like really upset when this stuff comes around again, these reminders of the things that we've lost. And I don't have those. I really have this like positive memory. Like, yeah, man, do I wish my mom was here to like babysit my kids and spend time with my children that she never had a chance to know would exist kind of thing. Like absolutely, but I don't have that same I don't even know. I don't know what to call it. I don't know why I process it differently. So I apologize listeners if I'm like on such a different wavelength of this process for losing something. I just know that my brain and my heart like are thinking about these things in a really different way for some reason.
But you're
There's
still
no
thinking about
reason
it.
to apologize. I mean, people process things differently. And when we process, if everybody's laughing at a joke, but you wouldn't feel the need to apologize. So why would you apologize?
God, I
Because
want
you
to know what
processed
joke everybody else is laughing at except for me and what happened.
it. You just didn't get it.
Right.
That's why dark humor is a lot like food. Some people
Okay.
just don't get it.
That's terrible.
Yeah, right. My daughter told me that joke.
Oh.
Um, it just so happens that tomorrow from recording, the synagogue that hired me and the synagogue that we are merging with are each holding individual ceremonies for Shabbat. we're both doing like a one last Shabbat, and their Shabbat service is focused on saying goodbye to the physical space, and our Shabbat is focused on honoring the history of the organization, because their people are moving into our space as we combine into one congregation. And the rituals are different. They have a different tenor, and yet they both have a feeling of losing something. And the feeling of loss is totally true because people are feeling it, and totally not true because they're remembering things differently than they actually happened. But the important thing is to acknowledge the feelings. And both the rabbi that I'm working with and I have worked hard to elicit memories from people in the legacy congregations and work with them and create ceremonies that honor the congregation that is being unified with another congregation, that makes them feel like they're losing a part of their identity, or they feel like they're losing their building or whatever it is,
Yeah.
because it's real, and
Yeah.
it's important to make it holy, and to say like we're going to remember the things that were wonderful. We might shed a tear, we might just celebrate, but starting, a couple weeks after tomorrow, we're going to be something new.
One of the questions I asked was, how will the history be preserved? What will be done to honor this? And as at least as this recording, that is a known unknown.
Yeah, that's a rough one. I especially for these entities that don't have like a building, right?
Mhm.
The Kutz had a location. The preserved pieces is the people, right? I don't remember if there's something specific at that location. Right when my synagogue moved, I believe there's a photo of the old sanctuary in the new space. I think a lot of places do something like that. They'll put up a building, a photo of the original building where they started or where they moved from, kind of thing. But I remember when COVID happened and UMC was closing and we were celebrating an anniversary year that I was helping to support, everybody was asking that sort of question. And I didn't have the answer then, and it doesn't exist now. And I don't, the memories of the program are with the people. It's not a centralized location, right? When I was the GUR advisor, we created a time capsule that year to be opened in a few years. I'm sure one of the board members has it in their house. Hey, if you're listening, if you're listening, whoever it is, I'm curious what was in there. I totally forget. Um,
What happens to the regional mascots?
Yeah, whoever's house they were in, that's where they stay. I'm sure.
Yeah.
You know, the and maybe the teens have a who hold on to it have this hope of continuing some entity of it, and they'll pass it along to somebody else that they knew, and maybe that happens once or twice, and then it just stays in somebody's house until it's forgotten what it was because they weren't part of the program.
Or it's like a superhero story, and one day that
Right,
thing gets brought out.
rising from the ashes.
Exactly.
Mhm.
Like I want to acknowledge that, like, we're getting nostalgic about Jewish youth group. Like, it's just youth group, but it also meant a lot to people. It certainly did to me, and it meant a lot to a lot of the teens, Barack, that you and I got to work with. So like I try to hold this balance of like, it was just youth group with also like, but it mattered, and it had meaning. Um, one of the things this made me think of, and like this feels like a pretty big stretch to go from the loss of Jewish youth group to the destruction of the temple. But when we think about the destruction of the temple, it changed ritual. We went from priests to rabbis. The ways that we, interact with our Judaism changed. So again, I'm not saying that the loss of Nifty is comparable to the loss of the temple, but our religion is full of having to adapt to certain situations. For a long time, Nifty was the pipeline for educators and clergy for the reform movement. Like, what happens now? I'm sure we will adapt. And rabbis came about because of the destruction of the temple, and things needed to change. But like, okay, already why shaking his hands a little bit at me.
I mean, there was already a mechanism in place where a group of people who were calling themselves rabbis thought that there was a better way to worship than by slicing animals' throats at the temple. And it was an argument that was brewing. What's the better way to practice this religion? Is it by sacrifice or is it by prayer and study? And in the heat of the argument, the temple is destroyed. Well, then the rabbinic side wins the argument by default, because if you're saying that the only way to be anachronistically phrased Jewish is to worship at a temple that doesn't exist anymore, you lose the argument, and you lose Judaism. But if you say that there's another way to do it, then we can preserve our culture. So the same thing with the Reform movement forming, these ideas brewing that people wanted to worship in a different way. They wanted to sit with the men who made decisions in this era, wanted to sit with their wives and wanted to dress like their neighbors and worship in pretty buildings with beautiful stained glass and spires and things, and worship in a language they understood. And so then the question became, well, how much Hebrew versus, in this case, German do we use, and how much are we allowed to sit with our wives, and how much are we allowed to, like, what parts of the dress are we going to keep and what parts are we going to leave alone, and what about the food and what about the music? And when all those things were nitpicked, that split off group split again, and basically Reform, Orthodox, and Conservative were formed all at the same time because they got named that way, but there was a mechanism for each of these to exist already.
Can I, on this topic of like sort of dealing with that grief of losing the Judaism they had, right? When the temple was destroyed. I wish I remember who this was and all the details of it. There was a session I attended at a conference once, and they talked about like Judaism 4.0, right? Which was like the first one was the temple, and then you lost the temple and you got rabbinic Judaism. And then there was the diaspora across Europe and across the world. And then there was like the Judaism we know today in the US of like reform and whatever, right? All these changes, massive changes to our religion. And I feel like there's another shift coming, and I don't know how many years it's going to be, but I think Judaism as we know it is going to change also
Yeah.
into something very different in terms of, right, that I'll say like two big things, right? Walls are becoming less important in terms of creating community, and services are being less attended and more community events are being attended. And so I that mixed in with like I know there's like decreasing class sizes and all the seminaries kind of thing. Like there's going to be a breaking point where right we're still in this like rabbinic Judaism phase, and I this is just I just want to put this out to all the people who love rabbinic Judaism. I'm not attacking rabbinic Judaism at all. I just think that in a number of years we won't have rabbinic Judaism in the way that we know it today, and that clergy may not be the leaders of our communities. There may be some other community-driven entity of some kind. I don't know what that looks like.
No, yeah, that's a Kaplanian model, and there's a mechanism that's already in place that could help make that happen. The problem with that is there is a difference between being trained to lead communities and Googling to lead communities.
No, and I totally get it, but I also think that hesitation that you're mentioning was likely mirrored with the priests at the temple and the rabbis wanting to lead, like the same that same exact conversation without the word Google of like, well, yeah, I guess they could, but they don't understand all the laws and rules of sacrificing, right? Like,
but they did.
Well, you got to agree that there was an element of like, there's no way that, right? They argued about which is it going to be, and the only reason they won was there was no temple.
That was in that moment. But then when they went to create the rules and things, they wouldn't argue unless they were experts, and they would defer to people.
God, what must that be like?
Right? They would defer to people who are experts, and they would make sure, like when so often in the Talmud, when there's an argument about how it might have been done, the sacrificial system, the narrative will get this air of, and this rabbi came from Jerusalem and he was here to able to answer all of our questions because it's Jerusalem.
Right. No, and I don't think rabbis are going to disappear, right? That's not, and I don't think they're going to become unimportant. I just think it's going to be a shift, and I don't know what that's going to look like.
We
Yeah.
still love you, RDY.
Yeah,
We think you're
I'm
important.
not I'm not worried that my
you make this podcast legitimate.
I'm not worried that my like occupational choice is going to be completely unavailable in
No,
20
I don't.
years.
No.
But I do worry about my colleagues who are, 10 and 15 years younger than me.
Hmm. Sure.
Yeah. I mean, Barack, essentially what you're saying is, and maybe I'm making too much of a connection here, but we talk about Kutzkamp, Camp, we talk about changes to Nifty and the environment. We might look back on this in 20 years saying, oh, here were the threads that led to this transformation, or here's where we saw the early signs of this happening.
Yeah.
It might be a little harder to identify in the moment, but like we clearly are going through a change in the Jewish community in North
Yeah.
America. And I
I've
hope that, you know, I hope that our listeners, don't disagree with that. You're of course welcome to, but like there's a lot of change going on right now.
Yeah, I've got a great comparison, great analogy for this. I think the things that we're feeling, and that what the reason I'm like we'll be fine, is it feels very similar, likely, to when all of the Catskills and the Borch Belt were closing, right?
Mm.
Of like, what are we going to do when our Jewish families can't get together anymore in the summer holidays up in the Catskills? What are we going to do? Right. And then cruise lines were invented, so we're fine. But but like that golden age of community people coming together and spending weeks at a time was a huge thing that no longer exists at all. And we're fine.
Yeah, it's funny that you mentioned cruises because I was on a cruise in Hanukkah of 2024.
Yeah.
And the cruise ship was, I think a decent sized ship, but for the Hanukkah celebration, there were 3 nights of Hanukkah, 4 nights of Hanukkah on the cruise ship. And the first night, there were no fewer than 200 people in that room celebrating Hanukkah together. And
That's
and the
nice.
feeling of being together as Jews, we didn't know during the day at the pool who was Jewish and who wasn't.
Yeah.
We're just enjoying margaritas and whatever. And to be in this room with 200 Jews, many of them Israelis, and about like five of us, clergy of some kind, whether it was trained rabbis and cantors or about to be rabbis and cantors or shlichei tzibur, which is a service leader who's not ordained.
Yeah.
It was an amazing feeling to be able to say, like, and you walk into this room not knowing if there's going to be enough people to really make it meaningful, and then there are 200. So I
Right.
think that the things that we do to celebrate can often surprise us,
Yeah.
especially when it comes to the youth. I think that they are far too important to too many people to ignore. And I do have faith that our youth are going to be taken care of, even if it takes some time to build up.
Yeah, and it's going to look different. And I think that the Catskills is a
Barack,
great
it
comparison.
has to look different.
Oh,
It's changing.
absolutely. Well, that's I think the Catskills is a great analogy for those people that are really feeling like right now there's no hope, right? When the Catskills were declining, the Nifty that you knew, right, did not exist at that point. There were other localized regional ones, but I don't remember the years that the WRJ started the Nifty programs. I think it was in like the late 60s, 70s. I don't remember. Anyway, somebody can correct us. But it wasn't the same that we knew, and it changed into what we know. And even though that is not what we knew. Like there will be something else that will come up because as RDY said, like our youth is important, our communities are important. People are doing things all over the place that just look different than what we know. And that's why I have a different forward perspective of like I'm not always like looking back. Here I'm not always looking back, and I think there was a piece of it when UMC was canceled for that COVID summer. I was on the phone with a dear friend and mentor, and I was upset about like they're canceling this. I have all these things going on. And he said, Brock, stop. What are you going to do next? right? It was a stop worrying about the past. It happened. You cannot control that. What are you going to do next?
Nice.
Can I ask a meta question? Brock, do I need to steer us into something nerdy before we wrap this?
Oh my God, you haven't even had a smash? This is probably the latest smash we've gotten. Do you have a smash for this?
I mean, I was just going to ask, like, what does this look like in nerd culture? You know, like, I
Marvel
think of,
Comics almost going under.
well, right. Well, I was going to say, like, there was a the dark times in the early 2000s when Star Trek went back off the air and it took 15
Sure.
years to come back. Like,
Yeah.
I was like, well, this is nice to look back on. I'm sorry I don't get this new experience. And
Yeah.
now Star Trek exists in a place of uncertainty. There are no TV shows in active production right now. So,
I
what
think
does that mean and look like?
I think you're spot on. Like when we have these large entities, right? Comic books were huge and they're still big. There's a resurgence, but comic books saw a huge decline, right? So much so that Marvel sold all its properties and now we have all these weird movie deals. But even when like, shows that were on for years and then left, right? With Battlestar Galactica, with Lost, with Buffy, like the Smallville, all these huge, many seasons spanning nerd culture entities that people really dove into, went to all of their conventions and their meetups and the things that were going on, and that they don't exist anymore. Another series popped up. It looked different. It wasn't the same. Maybe it wasn't as many seasons. Maybe it was a very different cultural experience. But there's still a lot of good stuff out there that even though you lost that other thing, you can reflect on it, remember it, find that new thing. There's a lot of good stuff out there.
It's so interesting because I have that philosophy about Star Trek that, like, there may not be another TV show for quite some time, but I kind of have faith that, like, either Star Trek itself will come back in something new,
Mm-hmm.
or something spiritually similar will take its place. And it doesn't take away from the hundreds of hours of reruns that I get to experience. And so there is a part of me that thinks that, like, something new and different and wonderful will happen. I think it's not going to be necessarily in the short term, but like something will happen because something has to happen. There's always going to be change.
Yeah.
I think also of the series that are short run that people fall in love with and don't happen again, like Firefly or Misfits of Science, and these shows that had a very small but incredibly loyal following that when it went away, people were totally flummoxed. Why would they get rid of something that was so amazing? And the example that you gave of
Yeah.
Smallville, um, to me, is a little different. Maybe, dare I say, closer to the Nifty example, because it started great and then they just turned it into something that it wasn't really speaking to the audience that was a part of it.
Mm.
And like I feel like a lot of superhero shows start out amazing and then become 90210.
Sure. I can feel that. I appreciate you bringing the Nerd Smash in.
I figured I
Finally.
should at some point.
Today's episode is Torah.
That's funny. But I think that's a good analogy too of like the things that we really love in nerd culture that we lose and they find their way sort of back. Speaking of which, like, Jack Kirby just had a street named after him in New York City. They had
Yes.
this whole unveiling piece.
Shout out to, I think Miriam Mora was there.
Roy
and-
Schwartz. With a
yeah.
lot of our Danny Fingeroth, a lot of our friends from past episodes were there, and Roy Schwartz is really the one who made it happen. So thank you to Roy for that. But that's definitely falls under that creating a memory, and they're able to create this physical entity of a remembrance, right? I know there's a museum in, I think, Ellenville, New York, for the Catskills, right? If you want to go back and remember those pieces, I don't know how long those will last, right? But this is a way to create that physical. So I get when your people are like, well, what are they going to do? How are we going to remember this? What are they doing to keep this alive in some way? And when there's no physical space, it's hard. It's hard to do that. I think people have to remember it, and that's how it sort of stays alive in them. But yeah.
But I think it can still be ritualized. There's a, talking about something that went away and is coming back. We've got a biennial this year. And if they don't do something to ritualize the loss of these regions, I think they are very much missing the point.
What a nice conversation we had just about
Things we loved.
dealing with unexpected things that we don't know. Yeah.
Normally, we ask our guests to give shout outs, but I'm going to take a moment of executive privilege and shout out some people. Derek, Amanda, Mindy, Sarah, Turkle, and so many other professional staff who became my mentors and colleagues and friends. And I'm scared to keep listing the dozens upon dozens of names purely out of fear that I will end up leaving someone out. Barack and RDY, I literally wouldn't be here if it wasn't for Nifty. Like, I wouldn't have met you, Barack.
Yeah.
I wouldn't be here. And of course, Sophie, Jake, Molly, Camille, Jonathan, and Micah. I learned just as much from you as you did from me.
I would like, if I may, to shout out Julie Marsh, who taught me so much about love of youth when I was her regional rabbi. And she was a hugely important part of the very beginning of my rabbinate.
I can't be the only one to not call out people who impacted me from my youth programs.
Yeah, Barack, call somebody out for God.
Yeah, well, Rabbi Melinda Pankin, who was my first youth advisor, Rabbi Victor Appel, who was the one who convinced me to take on the role of a part-time youth advisor, Rabbi Jared Sachs, who was my youth advisor and is still a mentor and person I look out to. Man, I'll stop there as my early ones because I don't know where to stop. Ethan had the thing written down and I'm just going from memory. And as we may know or may not know, my memory is terrible. So I will forget people if I continue to go. But here, you know what? Another one. I'm going to shout out whatever comes next.
Yes.
Yeah.
To the future.
To the future.
To the future.
Where we won't need roads.
That'll do it for this episode of Torah Smash. Our fiscal sponsor is Jewish Creativity International. Our theme music was created by Sean Fogel. You can check out Sean's bands and studio work at www.thesleepywest.com. If you enjoyed today's episode, be sure to rate and review us wherever you listen. It helps others find us and is an excellent way to support the podcast. We want to hear from you and continue today's nerdy discussion. Go to torahsmash.com to find where to connect with us online, purchase swag from our store, support us with a donation, find previous episodes, and more. And on top of everything else, I lost my watch. I guess it was just a matter of time.
Don't put that in whoever's doing this one.
They wouldn't argue unless they were experts.
God, what must that be like?
Right?
That's funny.